In my last video, we traveled to Mexico. And in this video, we're going back. Because Mexico seems to produce the most sadistic criminals known. Figures like Miguel Trevino, who relished in burning his victims alive and chopping them up as if they were firewood.
In a world of bad characters, analysts say Miguel Angel Trevino Morales held a special place.
He was the most sadistic cartel leader in the Americas.
Trevino, leader of the notorious Zetas drug cartel, is now in the custody of Mexican authorities, arrested Monday just across the border from the U.S.
Or Jesus Chavez, also known as the Camel, who said he doesn't know how many people he killed because he stopped counting after 800.
Chávez Castillo, alias El Camello, manifestó haber participado en el homicidio de 13 jóvenes que celebraban una fiesta en el fraccionamiento Salvacar.
And even though Mexico is a wild place in 2026,
fire, smoke, and chaos across several Mexican states. Cities brought to a standstill as criminal groups retaliate after Mexico's most wanted drug leader died following a military operation Sunday. Blocked highways, drivers forced out of their cars at gunpoint, trucks and buses set on fire. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, a former police officer known to most as El Mencho, was the leader of the Jalisco New Generation cartel, wounded during a Mexican military operation and later died while being transported to Mexico City.
That's right, it's official. Ryan Wedding is now in the custody of the LAPD. He arrived there on that government plane at 7:53 here at the Ontario airport, directly from Mexico City, where he was arrested. Ryan Wedding, whose aliases include El Jefe, the boss, Giant, and Public Enemy, was arrested last night just outside Mexico City. The former Olympian turned accused drug kingpin and murderer had been on the FBI's most wanted list, with a $15 million reward offered for his capture. Wedding accused of running a major transnational drug trafficking network that the FBI says shipped tons of cocaine from Colombia through Mexico into Los Angeles and then onto Canada. He's also accused of ordering hits on rivals, with multiple murders now attributed to him, including the shooting deaths of 2 members of a family in Ontario, Canada, back in 2023, reportedly in retaliation for a stolen drug shipment from Southern California.
it's not nearly as wild as it was in the early 2000s and early 2010s. So, we're going back. This is the story of El Teo.
Officials say El Teo is to blame for many of the beheaded bodies found dumped in Tijuana, and that he ordered his enemies' bodies to be dissolved in acid.
Teodoro Eduardo Garcia Cimental, also known as El Teo, was born in 1974 in Culiacan in the state of Sinaloa. Culiacan is widely regarded as a cradle of Mexican drug trafficking, with deep-rooted involvement in marijuana and opium production, which often influence local socio-economic conditions and family ties to illicit activities. Although El Teo's immediate family information is scarce, he does have 2 brothers. Antonio Garcia Cimental, also known as El Chris, and Jose Manuel Garcia Cimental, also known as El Chiquin or The Kid, who were both heavily involved in drug trafficking and entered around the same time as their brother. El Teo entered the drug business in 1995 when he began working for the Tijuana cartel, also known as the Arellano Felix organization. Founded by brothers Benjamin, Ramon, Javier, and Eduardo Arellano Felix. The organization was, at this time, one of Mexico's largest criminal groups.
The AFO was controlled by the brothers, primarily 2 brothers, Benjamin Arellano Felix and his brother Ramon. Benjamin can be described as someone more or less the brains of the organization, and I don't want to give him too much credit as far as being intelligent, because there's a big difference between intelligence and being a ruthless killer.
Although there is no information on his parents, it is believed he was somewhat born into a life of crime. With little to no parental supervision, he simply followed his brothers into the cartel. El Teo's early life in the organization were doing things like washing cars and running errands for mid-level figures and lieutenants in the cartel.
El Teo is known as just the worst of the worst, one of the most violent drug gang leaders in Tijuana.
In the early days of the organization, the Arellano Felix brothers ran the Tijuana Corridor, a critical entry point into California. However, El Chapo Guzman and Hector El Guerra Palma, leading the Sinaloa faction, were forced to pay the brothers taxes to move their product through Tijuana, which they deeply resented. In 1992, El Chapo and Palma sent several hitmen to a Puerto Vallarta nightclub to kill the Arellano Felix brothers. After several of Chapo and Palma's men opened fire inside of the nightclub, the brothers barely escaped through a bathroom window, but several of their men were killed.
Chapo's men stormed the discotheque and tried to execute the Arellano Felix brothers.
Los pistoleros se dirigieron a una mesa específica y se inició el tiroteo que duró por espacio de 10 minutos.
Ramon Arellano Felix and others were partying there. They were in the bathroom at the time and escaped through a bathroom window.
At the Guadalajara airport in 1993, in retaliation, the AFO hitmen attempted to ambush El Chapo at the airport.
Now, 8 gang members have been arrested for another crime far from home. The May killing in Guadalajara of 7 people, including Mexican Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas. A hit job gone wrong. The Cardinal accidentally in the line of fire. The intended victim, now in custody in Mexico, Joaquin Guzman, a drug lord from the state of Sinaloa. Rival drug lords wanted him dead, and they went to the streets of San Diego to recruit a hit squad.
And on October 26, 2008, Eduardo Arellano Felix was arrested.
A Saturday shootout in the streets of Tijuana, Mexico ended with the capture of the Doctor, the reputed leader of a drug cartel. The U.S. State Department once offered $5 million for the capture of 52-year-old Eduardo Arellano Felix. Mexican officials say Interpol and American officials were searching 180 countries for him. But Felix and his 11-year-old daughter were found just south of the U.S. border in a middle-class neighborhood, left with dozens of bullets on the ground after their capture. Tijuana used to be the gang's home turf. More recently, it's become a focal point of increasing violence between rival organized crime groups who often outgun authorities. Officials blame much of the violence in the city on fighting between the family-run cartel and a breakaway group. The Arellano Felix cartel emerged in the 1980s as a drug trafficking powerhouse across the U.S. border from San Diego. It's been weakened in recent years as leaders were killed or captured, including several brothers from the Arellano Felix family. Officials believe Eduardo's sister Enadina Arellano Felix is still part of the drug clan's leadership.
El Teo oversaw a man who dissolved hundreds of bodies in acid.
Now this is where El Teo's involvement emerges. After the arrest of Eduardo Arellano Felix, there was a massive power struggle that started to take place. El Teo decided to leave the Arellano Felix organization and form his own hit squad. Then decided to align with El Chapo and the Sinaloa cartel and went to war with his former employer.
Vicious cartels battling to control the $14 billion a year illicit trade feeding an insatiable U.S. appetite for drugs. Mexican authorities are hitting the cartels with all they have. Yesterday, 10 gangsters arrested in Mexico City with their cache of guns and grenades. But the gangs have the money and the weapons to fight back. With more than 6,000 slayings, 2008 was Mexico's most deadly year for drug violence. This year is starting to look even worse.
The death toll keeps mounting in Mexico's drug war. Now, more than 45,000 dead since President Felipe Calderón committed the army and federal police to combating the drug gangs.
At this point, El Teo told the Arellano Felix organization and any police officers that were willing to stand in his way that he would completely dismember them and dissolve them in acid.
In November, the bodies of several police officers were found decapitated, the heads arranged in threes in reference to El Teo's initials. Outside this restaurant, owned by a rival of El Teo, police found barrels containing human remains with a note suggesting all those who oppose El Teo will be sued.
Now, Miguel Trevino loved this method, but El Teo is the one who invented it. Santiago Mesa Lopez, also known as the Stew Maker, was born in 1964 in Guamulchil in the state of Sinaloa. He worked as a bricklayer his entire life until moving to Tijuana in the mid-1990s, seeking better job opportunities. Instead, he was recruited by El Teo and the Arellano Felix organization. At this time in the war, the bodies were piling up and they could only display so many. So, El Teo told Lopez, "We're going to get rid of the bodies by dissolving them in acid." They set up shop in a nearby chicken coop. To dissolve the bodies, they first dismembered their victims and put them in 55-gallon drums. Then added caustic soda, also known as sodium hydroxide or lye. And in 24 hours, the only thing left were teeth and small bone fragments. The fluid remains were then poured down a drainage system into septic tanks. And finally, in 2009, after nearly over a decade of dissolving victims, Santiago Mesa Lopez, or the Stew Maker, was arrested at the chicken coop.
In January 2009, a man called Santiago Mesa was detained. A humble bricklayer from Sinaloa State, he'd migrated north to Tijuana, like many, in search of a job. He found one.
¿Cómo hacías el trabajo? Yo lo echaba en tambo y ácido de ¿Qué tiempo se tardaba en deshacer un cuerpo? 4 horas. ¿Qué sustancias utilizabas para deshacer los cuerpos? Sosa. Una vez que se deshacían, ¿qué hacías con el líquido, con lo que quedaba? Lo echaba en una cosa.
¿En dónde?
Una cosa.
¿Dónde está?
Ahí está.
¿Aquí hay?
Aquí debajo de
¿Cómo cuántos cuerpos dejaste aquí?
Mesa confessed to disposing of the corpses of people kidnapped and then killed by the drug cartels. He said he dissolved the bodies and buried the remains in the grounds of his shack. Mesa became known as the Pozolero, the stew maker of the drug lords.
Lopez was then paraded for the world to see.
Hey.
Teo is such a larger-than-life character, and yet nobody seems to be able to find him. Why is that?
Well, to begin, I think there's a lot of people afraid of him, and with good reasons. He has been accused or mentioned as responsible for killing a lot of police officers and a lot of their rivals with no mercy, and he's a brutal killer.
And after just one more year of continuing to fight for drug turf into the United States and killing anyone that got in his way, on January 12th, 2010, El Teo was arrested.
Mexican police parading their prize. In the red is one of the country's most wanted men, Teodoro Garcia Cimentel, also known as El Teo. He's described as a kingpin. Narcotics police say he was once a top hitman in Tijuana's Arellano Felix cartel. But when most of its leadership was arrested in 2008, Garcia Cimentel formed his own gang, affiliated with the powerful Sinaloa cartel. Among violent men, he is feared.
García Cimentel era uno de los sujetos.
Teodoro Garcia Cimentel was one of the most wanted men by the Mexican and American governments. A reward of $2.35 million was offered for any information leading to his capture. Mexican authorities collaborated with the anti-drug squads in the United States, and for more than 5 months, police carried out work to try to locate him.
Officials say El Teo is to blame for many of the beheaded bodies found dumped in Tijuana, and that he ordered his enemies' bodies to be dissolved in acid. Mexico's drug violence has been spiraling upward as rival drug gangs fight for control of lucrative drug trafficking routes to the U.S. In an effort to impose law and order, President Felipe Calderón has launched a crackdown, but the gangs have fought back and continue to fight each other. Over the weekend, some 69 people were killed in drugs-related violence. But Garcia Cimentel's arrest is the second time this month a high-profile drug suspect has been captured. He was caught in La Paz with guns and cash that was also put on display.
And on February 7th, 2010, Jose Manuel Garcia Cimentel, the younger brother and lieutenant of El Teo, was arrested.